Welcome to the Dylan Experience. Today is episode 46, and I've got a special guest for you today. But before we get started, make sure you like, subscribe, follow wherever you are. Make sure you keep an eye on us. My guest today is mother to two boys, a best-selling author, an influencer, and a speaker. After her husband passed from a brain aneurysm, she found and created her way back to joy. She instinctively crafted a path in his honor to make him proud. She's become a shining example to. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna restart that if you don't mind, because I think
That's
something is going on in my.
I can hear it.
My background. I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Try this again. Welcome to the Dylan Experience. Today's episode 46, and I've got a special guest for you today. But before we get to that, make sure you like, subscribe, follow us. Make sure you keep an eye on this podcast because there's more to come. My guest today is a mother to two boys, a best-selling author, influencer, and speaker. After her husband passed from a brain aneurysm, she found and created her way back to joy. She instinctively crafted a path in his honor to make him proud. She has become a shining example of choosing to engage with love even after loss. My guest is the author of the books Loving Life After Loss and Happy Healing. I want to welcome Marie Alessi. Marie, how are you?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really good. How are you, Dylan?
Busy. Always busy. It's been a crazy week, but a good week. So
Yeah.
Marie, we obviously have a lot to talk about, and I don't know. We haven't really talked about where I come from, and it's quite interesting to have you on the podcast because if you didn't know, I lost my dad to suicide at 6 years old. So I come from a very interesting kind of position in terms of how you came through loss and how I came through loss. Because I was one of those boys, right?
Yeah.
I was one of those boys who came through loss, and you are a mother that has come through loss of a very similar situation. So I'm really interested in having this conversation with you.
Me too.
And when we may as well get into it. So why don't you start with you? Tell me about how you became this. How did you get here?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I am really looking forward to doing this, Dylan, because I feel we do not have these really open conversations about suicide, about death, about how we're dealing with it thereafter enough. So I sometimes feel that society is very stuck in their approach and how we're dealing with loss, and I'm here to change that. That's basically, in a nutshell, who I am. I'll give you a bit of a background so that your audience gets a bit of a feel for where I'm coming from, who I am. I'm originally from Austria, because that's one thing people always wonder about, where's that accent from? I moved to Australia in 2004, just literally following a very, very strong calling. I always had the feeling I was born on the wrong side of the planet, and that I was meant to live here. And I followed that calling and made it happen. So 7 years, 12 trips, I finally came here to stay here and live here for good. And I couldn't have been happier. It was just really amazing. 10 months later, I met Rob. And another 10 months later, we were married. And if anybody would have told me that you're moving to the other side of the world past the age of 30, meet the man of your dreams and get married 10 months later, I thought, if he's Mr. Right, he'll still be Mr. Right 3 to 5 years later, no rush. But when Rob proposed 5 months after meeting me, I'm like, of course, there was no doubt ever. And also not the 13 years after that we had together. So it really was a decision from the heart, absolute clarity. And Rob and I really were that couple. Everybody looked up to us as that couple. Oh my God, you two, still so in love after all these years. And how do you do it? And I think how we did it was we were always in the present moment with each other. We really, truly lived a relationship of no regrets. We were absolutely open and honest to each other and had each other's back and were each other's biggest supporters. And, the one thing that I'm not sure if you know about me is that I lost my dad when I was 20. And when my dad passed, I had no tools to deal with that. I had no idea how to cope with losing him at such a young age. And then, thinking of you, thinking of my boys, it's not to compare, but obviously there are people who are a lot younger. And I'm not sure about your statistics or if you're aware of the statistics in your country, in our country, in Australia. it's actually 1 in 20 kids that lose one or more, like one or both parents before the age of 18. And I think it's quite a shocking statistic when you think about it, you know.
Yeah.
So due to how I didn't know how to cope with my dad's passing, and that I felt like there were all these, I wish I would have said, wish I would have done, I wish. The biggest gift, because I talk a lot about gifts in adversity, and the biggest gift that I got through my dad's passing was to never hold back. I just always tell people, when there's something beautiful I have to say, I say it. I don't hold back. I don't wait till tomorrow or till it's too late. And it doesn't come from a space of fear anymore. It comes from a space of love now. I just want to tell people, you know. And my mentor actually picked me up on that just the other day. He said, you have just got away with words of constantly supporting and telling people and encouraging them. I really love that about you. And I'm like, that's one of my gifts that I received. And it came in very handy with Rob, you know, living a life of no regrets. And just, I don't think there was one day in the entire relationship we had where we didn't tell each other how much we loved each other. It's just really not out of habit, just out of wanting to. And yeah, I think that was really beautiful. It gave me a very different background in how I dealt with Rob's passing.
How long has it been?
It'll be 4 years in June now.
What was it like when it first happened?
I think the moment I found out, officially, I have to say, because the entire day I had this feeling that something had happened, because Rob was supposed to call me in the morning and I could always rely on him. When he said he would call me at 7:30, he would call at 7:30 on a dot. And I remember waking up at 7:31 that morning and thinking, he hasn't called me, that's odd. And I went on with my day, and the entire day my anxiety just started rising. And I'm usually not a person that has anxiety. I'm not really familiar with that, but I could feel it that day. I was like, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. I can feel it. It's just, why does he not call me back? You know, you come up with all these excuses in your head. Oh, maybe he lost his phone. Maybe he forgot his phone in a hotel. Maybe, I don't know, you know, you come up with a billion excuses just not to face what you're actually fearing. And that you face what you're actually fearing became louder and louder in the background, and I didn't want to buy into it. And around lunchtime, I had this epiphany that Rob left the hotel details, because he always said, I want to know where you're going, so in case something happens, you know, you hear something about a drain being stopped or whatever, I just want to know where you are. And vice versa, he always told me when he went on a business trip where he was staying, which hotel. So he was on a business trip away on the other side of Australia. We're talking 5 hours flight away. And yeah, I had this epiphany. I called the hotel, and while I'm dialing the number to call the hotel, I had this vision of Rob collapsing in a shower. And I'm like, don't, Marie, you're just driving yourself nuts. Just be calm, just tell them, you know. But when I had this lady on the phone, I said, can you please send somebody up to my husband's room? I said, can you also check in a shower? I said it because I thought, I saw that, I have to say it. I don't know why, you know. And that's why they found him. Rob had a brain aneurysm, collapsed in a shower and died on the spot. There was no pre-warning. He was in the prime of his life. He was 45, super fit, healthy, a surfer, you know. And all of a sudden he was gone. So the moment I found out was about 4 hours later, when finally a sergeant made a call to break the rules, basically, because the rules are that you have to send police to somebody's house. You can't tell them over the phone. But because I kept ringing, and I kept ringing a hotel, and they ran out of excuses, and they were not allowed to tell me, he made a decision to tell me over the phone. I was so grateful he did. I was so grateful. He put me out of my misery, and he told me over the phone. And the minute I found out, it literally felt like, you know, our favorite happy song playing on a record player, and all of a sudden the needle scratches all over it and the music stops. That's how it felt. Like, literally, it was like somebody pulled the rug underneath my feet. I just sank to the floor and sat there, and it's like, it felt so surreal. I thought, this, you know, there's something must be wrong here. It can't be right. He's probably in hospital, in ICU, whatever, but don't tell me he's dead. That's impossible, you know. And yeah, so it felt very surreal the moment I heard, because it's just something that you're never prepared for, to get that phone call.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's it's a remarkably difficult thing to imagine, even just think about death, and in that, especially in that capacity of like, you have someone so close to you all day, every day. And all of a sudden they're just gone. I mean, that level of connection creates such a drastic disconnection.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
But it's the risk we take for, choosing love in that regard. How do you feel, how do you feel that impacted you in your parenting, kind of moving that conversation to the boys of how did you manage your grief, and then how did you also walk them through it? Like what was that like, or what has that been like? It's 4 years is still early. Like it's still there.
Yeah. I have to be honest, it feels like a completely different lifetime now, but the way I dealt with it is, I have to take you back to a moment that Rob and I shared in our bedroom, actually, when he came home from work and there was an accident and somebody had died on the road. And things like that trigger situations, trigger conversations between couples. What would happen if, how would you deal with that? How would I deal with it? And the one thing we always said to each other when something like that came up, we both said to each other, I would want you to take the boys and create the happiest life possible. Don't you dare, just sit there and cry for the rest of your life. I don't want that for you. And we both said that to each other, and we meant it wholeheartedly. So when it actually happened, because of course a situation, a conversation like that always feels like theory, but then when it happens, it's so different. It really slaps you in the face. It's just so real. So I just knew instantly that this is my focus. This is what I had to do. This is what I choose to do every single day, to focus on how can I create the happiest life possible for these boys and myself. And I knew, just thinking about it, I can see Rob sitting there smiling. I know that's what he wanted for us. I know that's what he would support wholeheartedly. And he did. I felt really, really guided throughout the entire time. I really felt very looked after. I also had moments, don't get me wrong, where I felt extremely alone and scared sometimes. I know of one situation where I had a nervous breakdown in my kitchen. It was about a week after his funeral. And it was because I had not set any boundaries for myself. I had not taken any time for myself. I was just there for everyone else and holding space for everyone else, in particular for my boys, obviously, which was absolutely fair enough and what I wanted. But I've spread myself too thin. I've left myself too open, and I fell apart, literally fell apart on the kitchen floor. I remember calling out to the boys because they were fighting over brushing their teeth, something really trivial. And I asked them a couple of times to stop. And when it just went on and on, I just called out to them, I just need peace and quiet. And I remember the minute I said that out loud, it was like a valve had opened that I couldn't close anymore. It just came out of me. I just started saying that sentence over and over again, and it got louder and louder and louder. And at the end of the time, I was just screaming it on top of my lungs, and I was whacking the kitchen cupboards, and I was literally just completely falling apart. I was falling to pieces on our kitchen floor. And after that, it was quiet as, and I thought, wow, that was one of the most surreal out-of-body experiences I've ever had. It was like I was watching myself and I could not stop it. It was so strong. It came with such vehemence. I just couldn't hold back. And I also remember thinking, what are the neighbors going to do? Are they going to call the police? Are they going to call an ambulance? Are they going to take me away from my kids and strap me up? I literally had all these thoughts going through my mind. And after that, I sat down with the boys and they were upstairs in my bedroom, and my younger one was hiding under the blanket and the other one was sitting there just staring, basically, because he just didn't know what to say or to do. I could see there was so much fear, and I felt so horrible that I had caused that. And at the same time, I knew in hindsight, not at that very moment,
how important it was for me to be raw and real, and for them to witness that, as harsh as it was for them and as scary as it was for all three of us. One of my sons had a similar breakdown only 2 days later, and I could explain to the other son, that's exactly what happened to me. You know, it's nothing personal. It's not against you. He's just not coping with his emotions. And sometimes when emotions get too strong and too much, that's what we do. We fall apart. But that's why we need to allow help in. It's important to allow help in, to live our emotions in a more safer way, you know, to give them space to come out. So we had really open conversations from the very get-go. From the very get-go, I was just completely honest and straightforward with them. I mean, seriously, there is no sugarcoating a message like your dad has died. There is no sugarcoating the message. I had to tell them straight up. From the very first moment, I was just open and honest. And I also told them what our plan was, if you could even call it a plan, you know, that Dad and I have decided we want our life to be happy, and that's, I'm going to do everything I can to do that. And interestingly enough, it was the very first question that my older son asked me when I told them that Rob had passed. He looked at me and said, "Who's going to take care of us now, Mom?" And I said, I will take care of you. And saying that out loud, I only realized later on how important it was for all three of us, for me to say it out loud and for them to hear it out loud, if that makes sense. So, yeah. I was always very open and straightforward with them. It was really important.
How old were they when he passed?
They were 10 and 8, so they are 12 and 14 now.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that was what my little son actually said to me after my older son said, "Who's going to take care of us?" My little one looked at me and he said, "I'm only 8 and I'm not going to have a daddy anymore." And that pierced through my heart. I'll never forget that. It was so gut-wrenching to hear him say that, you know. And we just hugged and cried together, and I just knew in that moment, this is me. So I stepped into that sole parenting role from the very first moment, and I embraced it wholeheartedly. And I knew there is no, is this good, is this bad, is this sad, is this whatever. There was no label needed. It was just it. That's just me now, and I'm going to take any chance I can to create something really awesome for you guys. So I just did that from day dot.
It's incredible. You know, it's incredibly profound. Do you think that Rob's kind of almost forewarning of, you know, if this happens, I want you to be happy, I want you to find joy. Yeah. Do you think if you didn't have that, things would be different?
Not massively. However, it contributed big time to that feeling of allowing, that feeling of I'm allowed to be happy. I'm allowed to have joy in my life because I knew Rob wanted that. I think it might be a lot trickier or harder for some people when they don't feel that or know that from their partners. So that was definitely a blessing in disguise. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's why I asked the question. It's not a common thing that happens, I think. You know, I don't think we have these conversations every day of like, well, you know what, if I die, I really want you to go find happiness. Like, I really want you to go, you know, enjoy life after me. You know,
I believe it's so important we do have these conversations, though. You know, for anybody listening who hasn't had that conversation, do it now, do it tonight, do it whenever you can, as soon as possible. It's beautiful. Speak from your heart, because, you know, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to that's love. You know, love just wants you to be happy. It's that simple.
Yeah, it is. I'm curious to kind of step out of the context of death. How do you define love?
Oh my goodness, that just took me back to a conversation I had with my dad when I was 17, and it's really beautiful because I actually shared the exact same conversation with Rob. Believe it or not, he asked me that in our first week of dating. How do you define love? He asked me the exact same question, and I took him back to the same conversation, which I'm doing now. So when I was 17, my dad said to me that love is a pure act of thinking and deciding. And I thought, oh, what BS? Seriously, I was 17, I was a pure romantic, and I thought, that is such a crap answer. It's so unromantic. How can love be a pure act of thinking and deciding? That's just more to that, you know? And he said, look, don't get me wrong. There's the feeling of being in love. And I can promise you that won't always last. And there is love. And love is knowing that you want to spend the rest of your life with that person, even if you don't feel in love with him or her for a couple of days in between. And I thought that is really beautiful. And I never understood the depth of that conversation till way later, you know, and he had already passed at that stage, but I thought, yep, Pupsel, that's what I called him. You were right, you know, that really is so true. And when I met Rob, I just knew it was already a decision I had made that I want to spend the rest of his life, obviously, but, you know, I didn't know that at that time, but the rest of our lives together, you know, I really wanted that. And I knew, and yet I was lucky enough that I never fell out of love with Rob. In all those 13 years, I didn't have any moment where I didn't feel in love with him. So I think I was doubly blessed, really, to have that, you know, to be in love and love Rob at the same time. It's just amazing. And I know how rare that is.
Yeah. That's,
yeah.
I think, you know, I've worked with people for quite some time now. And I think when people walk into something with a clear definition of what they're trying to accomplish, like, realistically, love is a goal for people, right? You know, when you get married, you're not, you know, we don't live in the world of, you know, we're getting married to, you know, to just have kids and to procreate and to, you know, like for you to cook me meals and for me to work. Like, that's not how it works anymore. Like there is this almost profound sense of love is a real thing. It's a tangible reason now. And I don't think people really have a clear definition of it yet. We have this hallmark idea that love is a you know, bouquet of flowers and a Hallmark card,
chocolates
you know,
and rainbows.
right. Like, it's supposed to be something, but we really don't have a societal definition. I speak from the American standpoint, but I imagine it's not that much different than in Australia.
It's quite global.
Yeah. And I think it's incredibly important that we find people like yourself and people like myself, because my definition isn't all that different, right? But it is a definition.
What's yours?
Action without expectation.
Oh, I gotta love it. It's so simple and it's so beautiful. I love it.
And yet it's so complicated, right? Like because I look
simple
at it,
doesn't always mean easy, hey?
right? Like, it's when I look at that, and here's a good conversation for us. I look at love and I see two one-way roads, right? Not a combined highway or something like that, not a two-way road. It's two one-ways, right? Where my job, if I'm in love with my wife, my job is to give her action without expectation, right? And so it's a one-way road. Like, I am here to give to her. Now, and realistically, if we're going to have a loving relationship, she has to do the same for me, right? Without expecting me to do anything, right? But that does leave, when I look at that, that leaves issues, right? There's ways that can be manipulated, or, you know, we do the human thing where, like, power dynamics and manipulation, deceit, all that stuff. And so we have this idea of marriage, which is where the expectations lie, because I don't think you can have a necessarily long relationship without having some expectations. So we've created this idea of marriage. We've created this idea of being in a relationship together, whatever you want to call it. That is the expectation, right? The expectation is
Yeah.
you don't cheat on me,
That's true.
you support
Yeah.
me, you take care of me,
Yeah.
you know, and there can be, you know, almost unwritten rules in that of this is what cheating looks like, right? Which some people don't have that conversation. And so the unwritten rules are not really understood. So if you don't clarify what I think the important expectations are of this is what our relationship and the boundaries of it look like, that's when you struggle. But that doesn't negate the ability for you to love, right? And so you can have a bad relationship, but have love. Or you can have a good relationship, or I'm sorry, you can have beautiful love and have a beautiful relationship, or any combination of all of them.
I agree.
And you can even lose and still love, because the relationship is not the necessity for love. It's simply the expectations of the relationship.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I look at it. And like I said, I think it's quite complicated, even though it's elegant and simple in how I define it. And same with you. Your definition is also quite simple yet elegant, and yet there's so much more behind it.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I agree with you, Dylan. There's so much more behind it, and I think it's a lesson that I learned even deeper throughout Rob's passing. And as I said at the beginning, you know, I often talk about the hidden gifts in adversity, and one of them was actually such a beautiful gem to find out more about our relationship. And the one epiphany that I had that gave me so much peace and contributed bucket loads to my healing was a moment when I realized, and it was probably not a moment, it was a bit of a development, it was more a process, a journey that I went through. But the moment I actually really realized that whole concept of it, it gave me so much peace. And that was that Rob and I had a soul contract, and that was part of it. His passing was part of that soul contract, that we had chosen that for a reason. And it truly overwhelmed me, because Rob was very well known even amongst his friends and co-workers, and so many people came up to me at the wake and told me about that, how Rob always put me on a pedestal, and he just, you know, he raved about me and our relationship we had to everyone who wanted or didn't want to hear it, really. So I you know, I loved that he did that, and it was really beautiful to hear that way past his passing. And so I'm coming from this point of saying, I already knew in our lifetime together how much Rob truly loved me, truly deeply loved me. Yet it went even beyond that when I realized the concept of that he had chosen to part early for me to do what I do now. And there was so much purpose behind that, but even more so, such a deep, profound, soul level love that really blew me away. And I understand that everybody's got different backgrounds in terms of faith and what their beliefs are, but this is mine. And I've got a very strong belief around that this is what we did. That was our soul contract we had. So we chose to have this experience together. We chose each other. I moved to the other side of the planet to do that, you know. And he said, he always said, you know, I would have found you wherever you are, because he traveled through Europe, the exact same places where I lived, and I traveled through Australia. And then, you know, one day we were just meant to meet, and the rest is history. And now we sit here talking about it. I love it.
What I find really interesting, the timing of what you just said is all incredible, as well as this. I just dropped a podcast today, and this podcast can be quite a ways in the future. I'm like 15 weeks ahead at this point. Today was an episode called Foundations of Faith. And I had a conversation which is really remarkable. I'm agnostic, so I don't really necessarily believe in higher powers, but the person I talked to,
just kidding.
the person I talked to, his name was Jim Burgoon, was, or is, I shouldn't say was, is a Christian, a devout Christian.
Yeah.
And we had a very interesting conversation. And what I love about what you just said was, you know, you look at other people's faith and it's not really important how they have faith, but it's important
Yeah.
that you have faith in what you see.
Yeah.
And you know what I've toyed with for a long time is this understanding of values, of being able to look at what you want in life and really developing your own definitions of how to operate within your world, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I look at myself and I have this idea that I have a really kind of a holy trinity of empathy, integrity, and learning. And those three things really are so important to me that that's how I operate within the world. And I've defined them. I understand exactly how to understand whether I'm actually using them or not. Am I overutilizing them? Am I underutilizing them? And what happens when I do? But at the core of that is this foundation of faith that no matter who you are or what you do, I don't care if you have faith in God. I don't care if you have faith in your values. You need a sense of faith in something. Otherwise, you just become more or less nihilistic and
I love that. That's
more
beautiful.
or less lost to the world, right? You have to, and it's really interesting to see that almost confirmed in you, is that you have lost, yet you have maintained this critical foundation of faith in what you must do, right?
Yeah.
Where your purpose is, what is your next step? Even when I know it's, you know, you elegantly share this stuff now, but it hasn't always been elegant, right?
No.
It hasn't always been simple. It hasn't always been easy. But you make it look easy because you have this, I have no doubt, this core
Thank you.
strength within your faith. And I'm really curious about that. What do you attribute that strength to in terms of faith?
I think the answer is in the question. I really contribute my strength to the faith, you know, knowing that, and I'm not even saying thinking or believing, knowing that Rob and I had this soul contract and that we were meant to meet, that we're meant to do this, and that I was meant to step up and do what I do now, has given me immense strength. And I always talk about strength was one of the biggest gifts in adversity that I received. You know, strength, intuition were my two biggest gifts that I received. And I also remember there was one moment, and it was not that long before Rob passed, and I was walking out the door and I looked at Rob and I said, I think it was probably roughly a year or less before he passed. And you'll also notice I actually don't talk about loss. I talk about Rob's passing. I don't really agree with that word loss, but that's a different conversation. So about a year before then, I had this really bizarre vision. And I remember turning around to Rob and saying it to him. I said, babe, I've got this vision of me standing on stage speaking to thousands of people. And it scares the bejesus out of me. I really,
you can say
I
it if
don't
you
know.
need to. This is an explicit podcast.
Awesome. It scared the shit out of me. I was sitting there going like, what on earth, you know, it's like, what am I? And back then I you know, I was hosting networking functions and stuff like that. I was talking to like crowds on a quotation marks of like 50 people, you know, so it was not huge. And all of a sudden I'm having this vision of me standing on stage speaking to thousands and thousands of people. I'm talking like hundreds and thousands of people. And I was like, oh, wow, this is huge. I've got no idea where that's coming from, but it's getting bigger and bigger and it's getting stronger and stronger. It's like you know, it's like trying to tell me where I'm meant to be, and I don't know what to do with it. I don't know how to get there. I don't know, you know, when and if that's ever going to happen. And then about a year later at Rob's funeral, I'm standing on stage and I'm speaking to 500 people. So, you know, it's all of a sudden the crowd is like from 50 to 500. And it was not just reading down a eulogy that I had written. I presented a speech of love and connection. And I said that to him. I said, it's got something to do with love and connection. That's my message, but I don't know what it is exactly, or why, or where, circumstances, no idea. And there I am standing in front of 500 people speaking about love and connection. I wanted to leave every single person in the room with something they could take home that could change or impact their lives, because I'm like, I don't want to sit here and sob together about Rob. Like, that's not the purpose. That's not the purpose of his passing. I knew that it's instinctively, I just didn't know how to say to people. So what I did instead was delivering a speech of what Rob and I were about, of what he was about. His entire life was about love and connection. That's the last conversation we had together the night before he passed. We talked about love and connection and how he went out for dinner and he met this couple where she was from Perth and he was from Treviso, which is the town in Italy where his dad comes from. So they had something in common instantly, and I talked, and so they invited me to sit with them over dinner, and all night we talked about love and connection, and I think I left them with something really amazing to think about. And it really touched me. I'm like, I love that this is what our life is about. We always touch people in the sense of relationship, in the sense of love, just by who we were, but also through conversations like that. And I was just so touched that that was the last conversation he had with that couple and the last conversation he had with me about love and connection. And here I am standing on stage and speaking to 500 people, the biggest crowd I've ever spoken to at that stage in my life. And I just felt so held. I had such immense strength within me. I just felt Rob standing there right with me. I literally felt him to my left, standing there, putting his arm around me. I can't even express that, how I felt that, but I felt it physically, him standing there with me. And the most amazing thing, and I know I'm challenging some people on their beliefs, but again, this is my belief and I choose to go with that, is a friend of mine reached out to me about a week after the funeral, and she said, Marie, I'm so new to this whole spiritual world and thing. I'm literally just opening my heart to it. I've never had much to do with it. I was always more like science-based and, but she said, I can't help but shake that image. When you were standing on stage, I saw like a glistening silhouette to your left, and it looked like, I'm sure it was Rob who had his arm around you, And I'm like, that's exactly where I felt him. I said, you didn't see that for nothing. I felt him exactly on that side where you said it. And I felt that arm around me, and that's what she saw. And I'm like, oh, it was such a gift to hear that from somebody in the audience, and yeah, there was a lot of guidance, a lot of these moments where I felt just held and guided and looked after. And I still do that now. I feel very looked after on my path.
Does it ever feel, like right now, do you ever feel those waves of loneliness still?
I have felt it very intensely throughout our prolonged lockdown here, like when we had 4 or 5 months of lockdown. And, I work from home. Where I'm sitting right here is where Rob had all his tools. That was his garage, when Rob passed. A few months after, or probably a lot longer than that, I really needed time to come to terms with that, but we emptied the entire garage. And so I'm working from home, and it suits me so well because, the boys were so little when Rob died. And it is just a situation where I was quite a social butterfly. I loved catching up with people. I love hanging out with my friends. I'm one of, like, my nickname is the connector. Like, I always connect people. I'm always very connected to people. I've become very good at staying connected with people because I've moved so many times in my life that this is like something that I learned from very young. And then all of a sudden, from the outside world, it feels like nothing much has changed. I'm still working from home. I don't have to go anywhere, so I can still continue my job, which was awesome. But that opportunity of just, hey, let's catch up for a coffee. And in particular, I don't know how much you know about the 5 love languages, but my love language is physical touch and quality time. And that was gone all of a sudden. I'm a hugger. All my friends know me as a hugger. I'm a really good hugger. So I love giving long and good hugs. And that really became more and more important after Rob died, because, he wasn't there anymore. And I really needed that. And there's actually a study being done, how physical, like how hugs are really, really important on a daily basis for people, in terms of mental health. That's the exact topic we came together for. It is important that we receive our daily hugs, and they have to last for at least 20 seconds, I think. Yeah. I have to go back to the study now, but somebody sent that to me. I'm like, that makes so much sense. We all need to feel held. and looked after and cared for and nurtured. And what says that more than one hug, like seriously? And all of a sudden that was gone. And I felt that deeply. I really felt that deeply. For the first time in my life, I felt like, wow, I'm really longing for that, just to hug a person. I mean, I had my sons, but you know, they're preteens and teens, and there's only so many hugs they can take from a mom. So
Right.
it was just, yeah, that's where I felt it the most. But not so much on other days. I've become quite good in connecting, in staying connected with people, to make sure that I'm, yeah, in those circles that I need. I've become very selective of my circles. So I've gone from being a social butterfly and loving being at parties or at gatherings or going out, big crowds. I don't really cope well with big crowds anymore, but it's not so much, it doesn't feel like I have no coping mechanism. It more feels like a choice. You know, I just so much prefer, because that's my love language, quality time, to have conversation like you and I now, or when I go out with a friend having coffee, you know, just really quality time conversations and interactions. That's a choice, because life's too short for, you know, just wasting time. I just really want to be in the moment with the person I'm with and just enjoy that.
Yeah. I have to agree with you in many regards. And I think it's almost under discussed and almost misunderstood, where like I've chosen to do this podcast solely 100% because I want to, right? Like
Yeah.
it almost, if I didn't post it, I wouldn't be upset, right? Like if this was just an excuse to have deep conversations about deep topics, and I would never post this, I would never be upset with myself, because this is more for me than it ever will be for anybody else, right? I just know people would benefit from the conversation, because I just know.
I fully
right?
understand that. Yeah.
And so is this ever going to be something that that changes? Maybe, but I don't ever want it to be anything else. I want it to be this kind of, you and I have this connection, this ability to open each other up and have these really difficult conversations about death, about loss, passing, however you want to, expose that, talking about faith, talking about love. You just can't do that in everyday life. Like it's just not, it's almost not structured to happen, and it's unfair in some regards. Like it should be, like having, I shouldn't have to have a podcast to have a conversation about love with functioning adults that need to know it, right? That also have opinions on it and ideas on it. And it almost feels like, you go to a party and you have a conversation about losing someone, you might be bringing down the party, right? And that's not the case. If when people like you and I have conversations like this, we're not bringing down anything. We're building things up. We're building structures for people that need it. And so I think social media is kind of the beginning, but I think the cultural understanding of things like trauma, things like grief, loss, death, pain in general, I think it's changing. I think it's kind of transforming, where we kind of prioritize discussion, where we prioritize open conversation, because it's just, it's never, we've never had the scale that we have of discussion now, right? Social media is just a massive conglomerate of information, whether it's fact or fiction, I don't care. It's, people have been using fact or fiction throughout their lives, and throughout the lives of humanity. And so it's just, we're just seeing it at scale, and it's really interesting to see that. And I think it's kind of transforming, and people like myself, like you, are more willing to just sit down and create ideas and be creative in this endeavor of the human experience for and we're open and available to do that now, then more open to do that now than we ever have been.
I think, coming back to that hidden gifts in adversity, I think one of the gifts in the adversity of COVID that everybody has so globally experienced at the same time for the past 2 years plus, was that we have become more vulnerable openly. And I think that is a real gift. It has opened up conversations about dying, about loss, about how people deal with it, how people cope with mental health, with being locked away for so long, all these topics that were already there before COVID, but all of a sudden through COVID, it hit us all at the same time on a global level. And it has changed the way we talk to each other. It has opened up the way we talk about things. And I think that is a true gift in that adversity called COVID. And I really embrace that. I think it's amazing that we do that and that we talk about it more openly, because before, if you would have asked somebody, it's like, oh, no. People go into denial straight away. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about mental health issues or wants to admit there's guilt, there's shame involved. And now that is starting to drop off more and more, and people step out of their armors of guilt and shame, of hiding behind that and not talking about it. And I feel no shame whatsoever speaking up and saying, yeah, I felt extreme loneliness throughout lockdown. I felt that, and I needed ways to deal with that and overcome that and really work on that. And one, I'm going to share this here openly as well. One funny side effect that I did was I went on a dating app for the first time in my life, because I'm like, I need interaction, I need flirting, I need fun, I need love, I don't want to say you can find love on a dating app. Some people are lucky enough to do that, some not. But for me, it felt safe because I felt like, oh, really? You did? Yep. I love it. Whoop, whoop.
It's possible.
But, it definitely is possible. But for me, I'm just saying it felt safe because I was in lockdown and there was no, am I going to meet this person or not? There was just conversations. It kept it light. It kept it without pressure. It kept that whole question out, am I ready or not? It didn't matter. I could just talk and chat and flirt a little, and it was fun and it was beautiful and it made me feel amazing. So that's one of the ways that I overcame that loneliness, because I just started flirting with random men online where I never had to worry about if I need to meet them or not. It sounds very weird, but it's just something that I felt kept it light and fun. Yeah.
The public opinion on that has changed over time, right? Like if that was, if you did that in 2005, right? It would have been drastically different, right?
Oh yeah.
Like just how you said it, even I flirted with guys online, that phrase would have been like, are you crazy? In 2005 versus 2022, we're like, cool. Good for you.
Yeah, me too. Which one are you using? Exactly.
It's so interesting how things have changed, certainly with the advent of social media, but I see a lot of different things with social media. I see like social media is destroying us versus I don't see a ton of social media is actually building us up, right? There's this almost this disgust for what social media is doing to people, and yet there's no call for what it is doing for people, right? It's almost tearing apart the old structures of control on human thinking, right? Like, which can be bad and good, right? Like certainly we kind of used religion throughout the past millennia to really hinder people from taking the choices to extremes, right? So even though they did, right? So what we have now is we have this open conversation, and what we're finding, I think, is people are actually creating new unwritten rules that say, what I really find interesting is like the idea of sexual assault and how it's been discussed over the last 20 years. Right. Because I think it's very much transformed. Right.
Yeah.
Not only that, but suicide, loss, mental health in general, all of these things have more or less kind of shifted from being taboo subjects to being in the limelight of TikTok, right? In the limelight of Instagram and Facebook. And I think TikTok really started that trend of we have to be like, TikTok's kind of the realness platform. And that's where I'm on TikTok. Instagram has always been kind of
not on TikTok.
Oh man.
Maybe I need to.
Maybe. But like, you know, like Instagram's always been that fake arena, while Facebook has always been that family drama. You know, YouTube's the how-to section and Twitter's the dumpster fire, right? Like we have all of these little
I love how you label
all of these little micro pools of chaos. And then TikTok emerges not to be the white knight, but to be like the dark knight of, it's not what people wanted, but it's what people needed through the pandemic.
Oh, it's beautiful that you say that. It's funny because every time when I hear TikTok, I see people flossing in front of my eyes. That's how it all started, you know, with people flossing on TikTok. And I'm like, oh my God. I know I'm showing my age here. My boys are going like rolling their eyes, Mom. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, I really love that you say that, because from day dot, and I was probably one of the last people in my circle of friends and family to join Facebook. I literally came in years later, years after them, and I was fighting it for a really long time. And then I joined just due to the simple fact that I got sick of downloading photos of my camera, uploading them to email, sending them to family and friends, and then having to worry about if I left Auntie such and such out, and then she's upset because she didn't get that photo of Flynn being 3 years old poking his nose for the first time. You know, it's just always memory. He was probably a lot like younger when he did that, and I would have not posted photos. But you know, coming back to the whole Facebook thing, when I finally joined, everyone was like, oh, finally, you know, now we can take part of your life and we can see how you are living in Australia. Because you know, most of my family and friends are overseas, they're in Austria. So it's like not that I see them every couple of months or every year even. And it became easier. But I also have to say that with joining Facebook, I had a love-hate relationship from day dot. I could see how much it sucked time out of people's lives, how it disconnected people that used to talk to each other and then both stared at their phones. And there's actually, I don't know why that just came to me, but I want to share that quickly. There's actually a photographer who did amazing photos of people in conversation, I put that under quotation marks, both with their phones in their hands, and then posted the retouched photo without their phones. And in every single photo, what you feel is disconnection. And you don't even see the phone, you don't even see what's going on. But, you know, there are people, like one in particular is a couple laying back to back in bed and they're both on their phones. And then it's just like, you know, with their hand there and they're turning their backs on each other. And that was the thing that really got to me from day dot, that I thought it brings so much disconnection. However, there's always that duality, you know, there's always the two sides of the coin. It also brings a massive amount of connection back in, where people didn't talk, where people didn't see each other or couldn't see each other, and all of a sudden they can almost take part of each other's lives because they are kept in a loop. They know what's going on, they see, you know, what my life. And so many of my friends and family overseas tell me that, yeah, I've been keeping up with what you're doing on Facebook, I love what you do. So they're completely in the loop, they know what I'm doing. I don't know what they're doing, but you know, I'm just in the limelight with what I do and who I am through the group I'm running, etc. So my whole business is basically on Facebook at the moment. You know, I run my whole movement on Facebook. So I do use a lot of social media platforms to spread the love, and I make sure that whatever I spread stays positive, stays raw and real and true to my heart. And that's, I think, the most important part of all of that, to keep social media positive. And it's very tricky.
It is. It is, you know, and that people like to talk about that disconnection more than they like to talk about the connection. And I think that's
both there though. Yeah.
You know, and that's what I want to focus on realistically, because I work in a field, right? My focus is mental health. And so what I see is, I see trauma, I see sexual assault, sexual harassment, I see death, I see, you know, accidents, war, suicide, all of these difficult things.
Yeah.
And what I see social media providing people is a way to reconnect, right? All of those things are disconnecting, right? And I have personal experience with suicide most of all, because, you know, if you really look at suicide, you know, suicide isn't really the problem. It's the result of the problems. And most of the problems have something in common, and that's disconnection, right?
Yeah.
And you can more or less boil down a lot of those difficult issues to disconnection, right? Mental health issues, most of it starts within disconnection, right? And
it's so, yeah, no, sorry. I'll tell you that later, because you've just brought up one sentence for me.
Certainly, you know, and realistically, most of those people would never reconnect with society if they didn't have something like social media that brought them to people like myself, that brought them to people like you, right? Like people that have the ability to form the sentences and the words and the paragraphs and the, you know, the speeches that we are able to share with them are the words that they can't figure out for themselves sometimes. You know, and we are that connection that they've always been looking for, that support that they never had in their life, you know, that person that makes it okay for them to feel this stuff. You know, we are
that is so beautiful, that the person that makes it okay for them to feel that stuff. You know, I think that's what we need a lot more of, the validation of what we feel, what we go through.
It's remarkably connecting, and yet you know, more people want to say it's disconnecting than it is connecting, and there's an argument
it's got both, you know. And like, just perfect example, because in the world that I live in the topic that I deal with on a daily basis, grief, you know, there's sadness, there's bitterness, but there's laughter, there's joy, there's healing, there's all of that in grief. All of that is possible, yet we're so trained to just look at the sadness, the suffering, the hurt, the fears. When you look at grief support groups that they call themselves, I don't want to mock them, because there's a place for them, and there's a place where people just need to vent and need to feel heard and need to feel that they're not the only ones feeling that. However, in most of those groups, there is hardly any support offered. Okay, people listen to you, that's a part of support, but there's no support in terms of healing. There's no way out. There is no way out offered in those groups, and that is the pivotal point that we all need, you know, a way out of the suffering, a way out of the hurt, and that is hardly offered. That's why I started Loving Life After Loss, because I felt that's what people need.
How would you define that support? Like, what does that look like for you?
So you mean support, like I really mean support as in how it needs to look like for me? Is that what you're talking about? Or the support under quotation marks that is offered, not offered in those groups?
I guess both. I'm curious, like what do you think in terms of those groups? Like, when you say support is not offered, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so what I mean by that is I spend every couple of days, I go into groups because I'm part of the grief groups. And for me, it is more like a research, and it literally gives me topics to talk about, and I see the need and I want to do something about it. But these are not my platforms, and I very much respect that. So I don't go into other grief groups to harvest clients or anything like that. It's absolute horrible. It's not my style. However, I go in there, and every now and then I just spread some hope and I spread some love. And every time I do that, it's like me dropping a drop of honey, and all the bees and all of life are coming together. And I can see every time I offer something positive, rather than, yes, it is really horrible, and for me it was even worse, it is almost like a competition in there. Whose loss is fresher, who was younger, who had more kids, whose husband was younger when he died, who had a more tragic death, who has more traumatic experiences, whose PTSD is worse. It's like a competition battle in there. And I'm like, what on earth are you doing? We are meant to hold each other. We are meant to support each other, encourage each other, hold each other up, offer love and healing where people need it, and not, oh, mine's worse, mine's worse. Who is actually heard in that competition battle? Nobody. They're all just shouting over each other, on top of each other, and nobody's actually heard. We need people to listen to us. We need people to actively open-heartedly and open-mindedly listen to where we are at. And you know, when I said to you before that I actually don't use the word loss so much anymore.
Yeah, I was going to ask
I actually considered renaming the group, and then I thought no, because the group is called Loving Love After Loss, so I obviously have that word loss in there. But then I realized, no, that's where I'm picking them up from. People who come into the group still see it as loss, and I totally agree with that. I was there once too. That's why I called my first book that title, and that's why I called my movement that particular title. Now I think loss is only like, it's such a weird definition, loss, you know, something is not there anymore that you needed, or how do you actually define loss? And for me, it's like Rob has passed and it was part of our soul contract. That's how I see it. So for me, it's a passing, it's a choice that he made, that we made together, you know, on a soul level. That's how I see it. We made that choice together. So how can I call that loss? Loss is a very human definition. And it's okay. Some people need that, but it doesn't suit the way I think. It doesn't suit my beliefs. It doesn't really, it doesn't feel right when I say, I lost Rob. And I'm going to tell you the funniest thing that happened to me that really left me completely speechless when it came to the word loss. I did my first photo shoot when I needed professional photos done for the movement, for the book, all these things. And I ask a couple of people to come together. I needed like a group of people, and rather than asking my friends to travel all the way to the other side of Sydney, I saw if somebody was available, because I literally just needed people in the shot. And I said, does anybody want to be in a shot? Can you meet me there? Photo shoot, blah, 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 chat, eat coffee, you know. And two women came along that I've never met before. They sort of knew what I was doing from the movement. I can't remember if it had started already or not. But anyway, I got there, I met them. They were waiting at a cafe. And I remember saying to them, look, we've only got a couple of minutes. I just want to give you my background in a nutshell. And I lost my husband a couple of months ago. And she looked at me and said, have you found him yet? And I was so speechless. I was so gobsmacked. And I looked at her and I wasn't sure whether that's supposed to be funny or like disrespectful, or I really didn't know how to react. And I must have stared at her with such a blank face that she said to me, she said, I'm so sorry, I'm a funeral director. It's like, you know, part of who I am. I just bring lightness to a situation where everybody just sees heaviness. And it's like, no, it's absolutely fine. I was just so not prepared for that, you know. And that to me is really coming back to, how do we define loss even? You know, loss is something that we've lost. We don't know where it is. And I know exactly where Rob is. So I don't like to use the word loss because I know where he is. I still feel very connected and very guided, and I just believe that this was a choice that we made together. So hence I left the title of the group, because that's for me where I pick people up from, and usually they shift their thinking around that quite a bit as well. You know, I can see the choice in words and the difference. The change in behavior in my group is really beautiful. And when you come into my group, coming back to the original topic that we talk about here, you know, what does support actually look like? I always say my group is full of love and support. People just hold you in there. People listen to you. People offer you words of encouragement and words of healing and opportunities of healing. How can you look at this differently? How can you shift your perspective around that? And one of the most confronting sentences anybody has ever said to me, that was Rodolfo Di Angeli. I interviewed him in my podcast, and he said when his wife got diagnosed with cancer and they thought that she was dying, they shifted her perspective around, how can this be the best thing that has ever happened to me? And I thought, wow, this in itself is immense strength, to look at something that everybody else would look at as tragedy, as you know, dying, death, cancer, whatever you want to choose as a given topic, mental health, whatever it is.
Suicide.
How can this be the best thing that has ever happened to me? That is a super confronting and very challenging question, very challenging. And if you're not ready to hear it, it can literally feel like a slap in the face and very disrespectful. Yeah. Yet once you allow that in, and once you have healed a certain amount and have gone a certain path towards the light, towards the healing, or the lightness, I should say, then this sentence becomes a gift.
Right.
It becomes an absolute gift. It becomes an opportunity. It becomes a shift in perspective towards solution mode, and towards answers. Because we can sit in one corner for the rest of our lives, you know, just rocking back and forth and asking ourselves the question why over and over again, a question that will never ever be answered, no matter how often you ask it. Or we can turn around and say, how can this be the best thing that ever happened to me? And I truly understand the depth of challenge that and the depth of, you know, provoking that is put on a table by asking this question. When I heard it first, I felt like, whoa, somebody would have said that to me too early after Rob died. I don't know how I would have reacted.
Right.
So I just want to put it out there with a disclaimer. This is literally with no disrespect to anybody who might be in the very early stages of grief, but it is a little bit of a spark of hope that when you get to that stage where you can ask yourself that question, it will really do something beautiful for you, I believe.
This is not the first time that question has come up in this podcast.
Beautiful.
Right? Like this, you know, and it's because that's my story, right? Like that's exactly how I've created and crafted my own story. Like, renegotiation of narrative is incredibly powerful, right? And it's something that any human can do. It certainly takes a lot of effort. But, you know, for a long time, I looked at my dad's death as, you know, this is the worst thing that ever happened to me.
Of course.
And after I almost committed suicide, a lot of things transformed in my mind, right? I forced myself. I asked the first question I asked was, how did I get here? Right? Like my goal was to never become my father, never to do that. And yet here I am, you know, sitting on the floor with a Glock 34 in my hand ready to end my life. And I had to ask myself that question. And since I've done the work
all over my body, just thinking about that, it's so powerful. Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is I keep this, right? And this is a 9mm round. It's a Hornady critical defense, and it is the round that was in the chamber. And I keep that. You know, I found it one day because I remember put it in a plastic bag, and I kept it in a place, right? Like I just put it in a box, and I was like, I'm gonna keep that. I don't know why I put it in there. And I found it when I was moving into this house, and I was like, I'm going to keep that right in front of me every day. And I look at it every day and I see it, and it's a reminder of, you know, it's worthless, right? Like realistically, it's, you know, $1, you know, it's $1 round. But it won't do anything for the rest of its life. But in many regards, that $1 round is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Right. And I wouldn't have understood that had I never started with the question of how did I get here? Because how did I get here represented an understanding of my own story, of recognizing that when I asked that question, I had not fulfilled the potential that I had in me. Right. And so every time I look back and I didn't build this idea of it was the best thing that ever happened to me on what happened that day. It's built on what has happened ever since that day. And so as this round gets older, the more I understand that it really was the best day of my life. As hard and as painful, as much of a struggle as it was to get through, you know, I see both of these moments, the day my dad made his choice, and yet also on the, you know, in juxtaposition to the day that I made my choice, which is completely opposite of his. I get to live with this idea of understanding I made a good choice. You know, I made the choice that he couldn't. And it's an incredible thing to see that within myself. And not only that, but now see the incredible, right? Like the unexpected impact that I've made across the world, right? I have nearly 600,000 followers on TikTok as of today.
That's
And it's
beautiful.
like millions of people have seen my content and engaged with it, interacted with it. And I've saved lives. It doesn't feel like it to me because I don't see myself as the savior. I see myself as the messenger, and people save themselves. And yet I do know I impacted them, right? The words that I have said only came from me making the choice not to use this, to make this useless in many regards. And so it's remarkable to see the connection between what you have created in terms of your own perspective in comparative form to what I've created in my own story, in my own renegotiation of this, that we are so aligned in this idea, and yet we've come from different places to make it. And I love that. I think that's really incredible.
I love that too. And what I love in particular is what you just said. I really want to highlight that, because for me, that makes a true leader, that you say, it's not me. It's not me. Did you say healing them? It's me.
I'm not the savior.
You're the message. Yeah, you're not saving them. You're the messenger. And I think that truly makes you a true leader, really, because I fully believe in that. I don't want people to come to my healing journeys, programs, retreats, whatever I do with them, to expect that I will save them, that I will heal them. I don't see myself like that. I want to teach them tools that they can use on a daily basis to get themselves out of it. I want to shift their perspectives around how they look at life, how they look at the death of whoever that is they have had in their lives, So I think it's us talking about things that nobody else talks about. It is really important to have these conversations, because mental health is such a huge topic in the face of grief as well. So many people deal with mental health issues, sometimes even before, but often after having lost a loved one. And that is just something where we do need to talk about that more often. Accumulated grief, PTSD, all these things, depression that people deal with after feeling that they have lost, they really are sitting in this space of, I have lost someone. And to get them out of that, it takes different perspectives. It takes outside perspectives. It takes somebody holding space for you, so you can actually do that. And one thing I wanted to mention before, and I didn't want to interrupt your story, I've just recently had the pleasure of having a conversation with an amazing man, Jeffrey Johnson, and I actually want to connect you with him, because I think you two would have so much in common and so much to talk about in each other's podcasts. I'm saying he's about to embark on a journey, on a tour through the US with his two sons, to talk about mental health and mental health awareness. And he said one sentence to me that was so significant, and I've shared it so many times ever since. He said, the opposite of addiction is connection. And I thought, wow, this is so simple and so profound. And when you talked about, mental health and connection before, and how often we feel disconnected, I think what you said is so true. When we can focus more on the connection that social media offers us, the opportunity to connect rather than disconnect, that's where we can really do something actively. That's where we can use platforms that reach hundreds of thousands of people to share that message of, we're here. We are all in this together. We support you in this. We hold space for you. And let's face it, a lot of people dealing with mental health issues really feel that they're all alone in this, that nobody understands them. And loneliness is, a huge contributing factor.
You can almost get addicted to loneliness.
Yeah.
That's, one thing I wanted to add to what you said earlier, right before you talked about the addiction, the opposite of addiction is connection, which is remarkable. Is it takes courage, it takes willingness, right? You know, one of the struggles I found when I first kind of started this journey on TikTok was people always wanted me to go help people, right? Like they recognized how important I was for their journey. And so they would comment and tag me in other people's videos who were struggling. And initially I would respond, right? I would, I would offer my support. But after a while, I stopped because one, I never got any responses back. And when I did, there was an overwhelming lack of willingness to engage with any different perspective.
I can so relate. Yeah.
And you can't save everybody, and so if you take it upon yourself to try to become the savior, if you try and become this person that you think you can fix the world, or you think you can fix every person, promise you can't, because that first person that you engage with that doesn't have the willingness or the courage to start the healing journey, or whatever journey you want to call it, they are going to demolish you. And it's going to hurt, and it's going to create a rift in your identity, because you've taken on this idea that you need to be the savior, and you just can't be that person. And so, to hear you talk about how, you can't be that for other people, and you're the messenger just as I am. It's remarkably mature to realize that, right? I think it's a realization through experience in many ways that people are not going to let you save them unless they are willing to save themselves.
Absolutely. I cannot save anyone who doesn't want to be saved, and it's not my responsibility. And that was a huge thing for me to learn, because I have the very same thing happening in my group and through what I do, that people tag me and that people say, like, or they come into the group and completely empty their guts and then don't take anything that you offer them in terms of healing. And as brutal as that sounds, I had to remove some people out of the group that only came to just empty everything, but then not receive back. And I always stayed in touch with them, or got in touch, I can't say stayed in touch with them, but got in touch with them afterwards behind the scenes and said, look, you came into a group that is called Loving Life After Loss. People come into this group because that's what they're seeking for. That's what they're looking for. I am, grown up enough to understand that there is so many people out there who don't want to heal, and I need to respect that. It's not my responsibility to change everybody's mind that they want to heal, or that they even believe in the possibility of healing. I'm here to share the message about it. I'm here to share tools about it, absolutely, certainly. But if you just come into my group to drag everybody else down and yell around it's not possible, then I need to ask you politely to leave, because everybody else in here thinks it's possible, and hence they are changing their lives, and hence they are healing their pain because they believe it. And I can tell you one thing for sure that I have learned, and that's coming back to complete simplicity, but it's not always easy. Healing is a choice. And happiness is a choice. We need to understand that it's a choice that we can make. We don't have to, nobody forces you to, but I can promise you life's going to look a lot better if you do. But it's your choice. And if you don't choose that you want healing, if you don't choose that you want happiness, I'm not asking you that you believe it's true or possible straight away. But what I'm asking you is you need to make that choice. Do you actually want it? I'm here to help you through this. I'm here to help you see. I'm here to help you shift perspectives. I'm here to hand you the tools, but you're going to be the one making the decision, and you're going to be the one using those tools, if that makes sense. I think it's that beautiful analogy, if you teach somebody how to fish, they'll eat for the rest of their lives, and that's what I want to do.
I think people have a very difficult relationship with the truth and trust in general, right? Like when we talk about truth, I don't think you can really talk about it without the understanding of trust. And I found this in my own work of acting as a mental health coach for people and kind of walking people through these very same discussions that we're having. People have this overwhelmingly unrealistic concept of trust and truth. That there's almost an expectation. If I trust you, right, you're going to do everything that I want you to. Right. So if I reach out, okay, I trust that you're going to answer every single time. And if you don't, I can't trust you. And so it almost becomes, it's certainly unrealistic. It's illogical. But when you confront people about that, they don't ever think about it like that. They don't ever think about trust like that. And so they don't ever clearly define their relationship with truth. And if I've learned anything about life, it's that I know nothing about life, right? Like I've, people look at me as an expert on mental health, and I can tell you right now, I'm not, right? I may know more than other people, or I may be connecting things more than other people, but I promise you, I have so much more to learn about everything, because what we know to be true right now could be completely different in 25 years. Could be completely different in a year. Like, I mean, look at what 2019 versus 2020.
Who would have thought,
how many truths were broken in 1 year about how we thought society worked. And it just, this idea that we have this understanding that we know that what the truth is, it completely destroys your ability to transform yourself or make those choices of, I can heal, because you create this symphony of voices that says that's impossible. That's not possible. You can't do that. And so, wherever that comes from, whether it's from your mom, your dad, or you created it in contrast to your mom or dad, right? You need to address that. Like you have to have a discussion and an understanding about the relationship you have with the truth, because I promise you, you don't know it, right? Like,
and all the truth is so personal, there's my truth and there's your truth, and it can be completely different. And it's not that when my truth is different from yours, that you're automatically wrong, or the other way around. It's just that we all have our unique truth, and it is our unique perspective. So something that feels true to me doesn't have to be true to you, and vice versa. That's a really big thing. And I'm going to share something with you, because I've just come back from a business retreat that I've been on 2 weeks ago in Melbourne, and it was really quite incredible sitting with 15, I think there was about 15 of us, and sitting together with business owners, completely different walks of life, the coffee shop owner and a psychologist, and like all sorts of different people that came together. And when you look at what are the things that we all have in common, one thing I talk about this morning in my group is the lack of fun in our lives when we grow up, and when our focus goes onto family and business. And not that family is not fun, and not that my business can't be fun, although working in a space of grief, a lot of people will challenge that. So I said, how can we bring fun and joy into the space of grief, because that's where we all need it the most. So I brought that up as a topic, and coming out of that, I really felt so inspired to look at the world from a very, very different angle, and bring that into the group and allow that. And the one epiphany that I had about my own movement and what I do was, I often say I want to heal the world from grief, and that is not in terms of being the savior, but exactly what we just talked about, in terms of sharing different tools with the world that people didn't know about or are not used to using. And I realized in that moment when I was at the retreat that I'm up against a whole culture, if that makes sense, because it's not just that the mission itself, healing the world from grief, isn't big enough for me, but it's actually a step further. It's like I'm up against an entire culture, because there are cultures in our world that celebrate the loved one's life rather than his passing, if that makes sense. When you look at Mexico, where they've got the Day of the Dead, and where everybody wears like really colorful clothes. When you look at Japanese cultures, where they come together and they spend an entire week or two with with the dead body in terms of celebrating this person's life. There is so much in this world, so many different cultures that we can learn from, where we come back to celebrating this person's life. And I think that's the most important part that is lacking in our society, in our culture, where everybody has to go to, when somebody dies, you fall apart and you suffer and you cry. And if you don't cry enough, then you didn't love the person enough.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe how many times people said, you know, the amount of love you had for the person is the amount of, you know, grief that you feel thereafter. And I'm like, what BS is that?
Right.
That's your BS, your belief system. That's what you have learned. That's what you want to be true. Or I shouldn't even say want to be true. That's what you have learned to be true, but it's not. Because for me, I completely flipped that 180 degrees. For me, I made it my mission. The more joy I can create for our boys, that's what I want to equal the amount of love that I had for Rob. You know, that's how I want to portray how life needs to be for them. And the most beautiful proof came from my son directly. When he was 11, he's my older one, so he was 10 when Rob passed. When he was 11, we were upstairs in my master bedroom, and Flynn came to me and said, I have to tell you something, Mum. And I instantly knew, my heart just dropped. You know, you feel the depth of it. You're like, oh, what's coming, you know? He said, I just don't know how to say it to you. I don't want to make you sad or offend you. And I said, just say it. It's okay. You know, it's a safe space here. And he said, you know, our lives have sort of gotten better since Dad passed. And my heart dropped. I instantly, like, I had no idea how to react to that. And I looked at him and I tried to be as encouraging and as positive as possible, but I have to admit my heart dropped when he said that. And then he said, but it's not because he passed, it's because of what you made of it. I was like, I was speechless still, and I was blown away by the depth of it, by the depth of understanding from an 11-year-old who's just gone through that entire, you know, his dad passing at such a young age. And then he says that to me. I just knew I was on the right track. You know, that was the most beautiful proof that anybody could have ever given to me. And I actually asked him for permission if I was allowed to share that, because I felt that what he said to me would give so much hope and such a shift in perspective to the world. It would be such a gift. And he was like, absolutely, you can, Mum. I'm like, wow, thank you.
Yeah. Wow. How incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mind blowing.
I feel like we could spend a couple more hours talking about this, but maybe we should save it for another episode.
Absolutely.
And with that being said, I got to ask you the last question. I hope you've been thinking about it at least. And I'll take my time asking the question so you have a little bit of so you have a good answer. So if you had one message you could leave the world, what would that message be?
I absolutely love this question because it's always so loaded. You're like, oh, pressure, you know, what's the most important part? There's so many. I think for me, it's just the trust your intuition. That's that simple. Just trust your intuition. So many people I work with know intuitively that they need fun, they need joy and happiness and love, and they want that in their lives. Yeah. But, and I don't like the word but, I don't have to use it here, society has not taught them how to do that, or has taught them that it's wrong, under quotation marks, that to experience joy or love or laughter after somebody passed. And I just want everybody listening to this to know that it is okay to trust your intuition, and that there will be a moment where you want joy and love and laughter to come back into your lives. So just allow that in. It is okay.
Yeah. I love it. It's intuition has been one of the most important parts of all of what I do.
Yeah, likewise.
And it's a remarkable superpower when you really utilize it.
Mm.
And I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you shared that.
Thank you.
Marie, thank you for being
Mhm.
here and doing what you do. Clearly you're very good at it. And
Thank you.
not only that, you do an absolutely incredible job of honoring a man's life, right?
Mm.
And not only that, but you're honoring his legacy and his sons, and his legacy within yourself, right?
Mhm.
And that's a beautiful thing. And I'm happy to know you. I'm proud to know you. And
Thank you.
I feel like we're probably going to reconnect in the future. And I just
Absolutely.
always look forward to, I look forward to the long run of like meeting someone I talked to on my podcast a long time ago and just being like, tell me everything, right? Like, tell me everything
Yeah.
that you've done since then. Tell me
Yeah.
what's worked, what hasn't worked. I always look forward to those conversations. And I just love these conversations, right? And
Me
I'm glad
too.
you could join me. So
I'm so stoked to be here, Dylan. Thank you so much for having me. And I cannot wait. I'm going to fully put you on a spot publicly here to have you on my podcast. I really want to share your story as well. So I
do
really
it.
love that connection. And thank you so much for putting questions out there that really need to be asked. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. I hope I did a good job of challenging you.
100%. Thank you.
For everyone that is still listening at this point, I know my podcasts are long, but they are worthwhile to get to the end.
Yeah.
Please go check out Marie. I will definitely have all of the links to everything that she has available, which is plenty, in the description below. Check her out, follow her, join her Facebook group if you think it's something worthwhile for you. Check out her books, check out her podcast. Maybe I'll be on there. Yeah. Where's, where are you going next? Before we go, I do want to know this.
Yeah.
Where are you kind of taking your endeavors next?
Yeah. So I've obviously already got the group, as you mentioned, there's a few thousand people in there already. And my absolute favorite part of everything I do are my retreats that I run in Australia. And what's next is I'm actually right in the middle of it already. It's already started. So that's what I brought back from the retreat, that I need and want to build a network of people who are already working in this space, of inspiring people, of speaking up about mental health like you. I'm really connecting with more and more people that have already got a certain audience, because I don't believe in competition at all. I think we all need to focus so much more on the connection, on the collaboration, and building those networks. This is exactly what is my next step right now, and I've already started that in connecting with people like you, who've got a huge following, who've got a very important message, and who are willing to do something to change the world. And that is literally my next go-to, where I'm off to now. So it's just perfect timing that I met you now.
Absolutely. Let me know how I can help. I'd love
I
to.
will. Thank you.
Well, we got to call it quits. We got to end it at some point. Otherwise we'd be talking for a couple of days.
Yeah.
So if you've listened this far, thanks for paying attention. Thanks for listening in, and we will catch you next time on the Dylan Experience.
Thank you, Dylan.
And that's it. Thank you.